From childhood, most of us are conditioned to believe that life is a journey towards some final destination, a future version of ourselves that will finally feel complete. Complete when we become successful enough, respected enough, productive enough. We are taught to climb endlessly, to optimize constantly, to improve relentlessly. And somewhere along the way, existence itself quietly becomes a project, a problem to solve, a mountain to conquer. But have you ever noticed something strange? The horizon never gets closer. You achieve the goal, and almost immediately another one appears. You reach the summit, only to discover another mountain waiting behind it. For a brief moment, there is excitement, relief, validation. Then something unexpected emerges. Emptiness, a subtle hollowness difficult to explain. Many people experience this after major milestones, a promotion, graduation, recognition, financial success, even spiritual achievement. The mind whispers, "Now what?" Because the ego survives through movement. It survives through becoming. The moment there is nothing left to chase, the structure begins trembling. And perhaps this is why modern society fears stillness so deeply. Stillness threatens the entire illusion that your worth depends on perpetual forward motion. But what if your purpose was never waiting somewhere in the distance? What if life was never meant to be a desperate sprint toward an imaginary finish line? What if your existence was already enough before the achievements? Before the titles? Before the applause? There is a beautiful teaching hidden within Zen Buddhism. A monk once asked a master, "What is the way?" The master replied, "Ordinary mind is the way." Not extraordinary mind, not perfected mind, not endlessly striving mind. Ordinary mind, simple awareness, direct presence. To the ego, this answer feels disappointing, because the ego wants significance through exceptionality. It wants to become someone extraordinary in order to justify its existence. Yet many ancient spiritual traditions point toward the exact opposite realization. Peace is not found through becoming more. Peace emerges when the compulsion to constantly become finally softens. In Taoist philosophy, nature is often presented as the highest teacher. A meadow does not struggle to become a mountain. A river does not obsess over arriving at the ocean. A flower does not measure its worth against another flower. And yet all of them exist in complete harmony with themselves. Only human beings seem cursed with the belief that they must constantly earn the right to exist. This video is an invitation to step out of what we might call the destination trap. To stop treating life as a checklist of future achievements, and to rediscover what ancient sages, Zen masters, wandering monks, poets, and contemplatives understood long ago. That there is a profound freedom hidden inside presence, an expansive inner meadow, where your worth is no longer tied to productivity, where existence does not need constant justification, where you are finally allowed to stop running. Together, we will explore why the ego clings so desperately to the idea of a fixed purpose. Why achievement so often fails to satisfy the soul. Why standing still has become a radical act in modern culture. And how releasing the pressure of constant striving can reveal a quieter, deeper form of meaning. Not meaning discovered at the end of the journey, but meaning already waiting beneath your feet. Because perhaps the life you have been chasing is the one that has been quietly unfolding in front of you all along. Imagine standing in a vast open meadow at dawn. No finish line, no audience, no urgency, no mountain demanding to be conquered. Only the quiet movement of wind through tall grass, the sound of distant birds, the feeling of earth beneath your feet. And for a brief moment, something unusual happens. You stop becoming. and simply exist. To many people, this sounds almost unproductive, perhaps even irresponsible, because modern culture has trained us to associate stillness with laziness, rest with weakness, presence with stagnation. From an early age, we are taught that our worth is conditional upon achievement, performance, recognition, movement. The question is rarely, are you at peace? The question is, what are you doing next? What is your 5-year plan? What have you accomplished? And slowly, without realizing it, human beings begin transforming life itself into a destination-oriented project, a constant psychological climb towards some imagined future self. The successful self, the enlightened self, the admired self, the completed self. But there is a hidden danger in living this way. Because when the mind becomes obsessed with destinations, the present moment quietly loses all value. Today becomes merely a bridge to tomorrow. This moment becomes merely preparation for another moment. Existence itself becomes transactional, and eventually, many people reach a terrifying realization. They have spent their entire lives preparing to live without ever fully living. This is the destination trap. The illusion that fulfillment exists somewhere else, somewhere ahead, somewhere beyond the current version of your life. Yet Buddhism has warned about this pattern for thousands of years. The Buddha taught that craving creates suffering, precisely because craving places peace perpetually outside the present moment. The mind says, I will finally rest when I succeed, when I heal, when I find love, when I become wiser, when I arrive. But the moment one destination is reached, another immediately appears. The ego survives through incompletion. It needs another mountain, another horizon, another future identity. Otherwise, it begins to lose control. There is an old Zen saying, "You will never arrive where you already are." A strange sentence, almost paradoxical, yet deeply profound. Because spiritually speaking, many people are running toward a state of wholeness that can only be experienced now, not later, not after perfection. Now. This does not mean ambition itself is wrong, or that goals are meaningless. The issue is psychological attachment. The belief that your value as a human being depends upon constant progress. And this belief creates extraordinary exhaustion. Consider how often modern people feel guilty simply for resting. Even relaxation becomes performance. Meditation becomes another achievement. Healing becomes another project. Self-improvement becomes endless labor. The person cannot simply sit beneath a tree without wondering whether they are falling behind. This is why the metaphor of the meadow matters. The meadow represents a radically different way of existing. Not climbing, not chasing, not proving, simply inhabiting. A state where your worth is no longer tied to productivity, where existence itself is enough. To the ego, this feels terrifying. Because if your worth is inherent, then the entire structure of psychological striving begins collapsing. Many ancient sages discovered this truth through direct experience. The Taoist sages often wandered mountains, forests, and rivers, not because they rejected civilization entirely, but because nature revealed a different rhythm of existence. A tree does not force its growth. The moon does not compete with the stars. The seasons do not rush themselves. And yet everything unfolds with astonishing intelligence. Lao Tzu described this harmony through the concept of Wu Wei, effortless action, action aligned with the flow of life rather than forced against it. Modern culture struggles to understand this because we have become deeply addicted to force. Force productivity, force identity, force success, force meaning. Yet much of human suffering comes precisely from this endless resistance to what already is. This is where the Meadow connects to the idea of radical acceptance. Not passive surrender, not giving up on life, but releasing the constant internal war against the present moment. Most people treat the present as insufficient, too boring, too uncertain, too incomplete. The mind continuously escapes into future fantasies or past regrets, rarely resting here, rarely trusting here, rarely inhabiting here. But peace only exists here. The future never actually arrives as the future. It always arrives as another present moment. And if a person cannot inhabit the present now, they will carry the same restlessness into every future achievement. This explains why external success so often fails to provide lasting fulfillment. A person spends years pursuing a goal, sacrificing sleep, energy, relationships, mental peace. Finally, the goal is achieved. For a few brief days, there is excitement, validation, relief, then silence. A strange emptiness emerges, not because the achievement was meaningless, but because the ego mistakenly believed the achievement would permanently complete the self. There is a story about Alexander the Great that illustrates this beautifully. After conquering vast territories across the known world, Alexander reportedly wept because there were no more worlds left to conquer. Think about the tragedy hidden inside that sentence. A man achieved what most people would consider unimaginable greatness, and still the mind remained unsatisfied, still searching, still restless, still incomplete, because the problem was never the external world. The problem was the structure of craving itself. The ego cannot be permanently satisfied because its entire existence depends on seeking. This is why many spiritually awakened individuals gradually shift away from achievement-centered identity. Not because they become passive, but because they realize no external accomplishment can stabilize an internally fragmented mind. The Zen masters understood this deeply. One monk asked a Zen teacher, "How do I attain enlightenment?" The master responded, "Who is seeking it?" Again, the question disrupts the ego completely, because the ego imagines peace as another object to acquire, another peak to reach, another accomplishment to display. But true presence cannot be possessed. It can only be inhabited. The meadow symbolizes this inhabitation, a spacious inner state where life is no longer experienced as a race, where existence regains softness, where awareness expands beyond constant self-judgment. Imagine how differently life feels when every moment no longer needs to justify itself, when a walk is simply a walk, when silence is simply silence, when breathing is enough. To modern consciousness, this can sound dangerously unambitious. There is a hidden fear quietly controlling much of human behavior, not merely the fear of failure, but the fear of being ordinary. The fear that if we stop achieving, stop progressing, stop becoming, then perhaps we are nothing at all. This fear sits at the center of the ego, and the ego is extraordinarily clever. It rarely presents itself openly. Instead, it disguises itself as ambition, as productivity, as self-improvement, as purpose. It whispers, "You must become someone important. You must leave a legacy. You must justify your existence." At first, these ideas seem noble, even inspirational, but if examined carefully, much of modern ambition is driven less by love and more by fear. Fear of insignificance. fear of disappearing unnoticed, fear of confronting the terrifying simplicity of merely being alive. This is why many people remain psychologically incapable of rest. Even while resting, the mind continues calculating, comparing, planning, optimizing. The body lies still, but internally the ego continues sprinting toward imaginary futures. And perhaps this is why standing still has become such a radical act. To stand still in a culture obsessed with acceleration is almost an act of rebellion, because modern society depends upon perpetual dissatisfaction. A person who feels complete becomes difficult to manipulate, difficult to pressure, difficult to control. But the ego fears completion. Completion threatens its entire structure. There is an old Buddhist teaching that compares the ego to a monkey swinging endlessly from branch to branch. One desire to another, one fear to another, one identity to another, never resting, never arriving. The monkey survives through motion. And modern technology has amplified this condition to extraordinary levels. People no longer simply live life. They constantly document it, measure it, broadcast it, curate it, compare it. Even meaning itself becomes performance. People now feel pressure to build a personal brand around their spirituality, their suffering, their healing, their productivity, their uniqueness. The self becomes a project under endless construction. But beneath all this movement hides a deeper exhaustion. Because the soul was never designed to exist as permanent performance. There is a subtle violence in constantly forcing yourself to become someone. And eventually, many people reach a breaking point, not because they are weak, but because the nervous system cannot sustain endless psychological striving forever. This is often the moment the meadow begins appearing, not during triumph, during collapse, during burnout, during disillusionment, when the old strategies stop working, when achievement no longer satisfies, when distraction no longer numbs the emptiness. Suddenly, a person begins questioning everything. Why am I running? Who taught me that my worth depends on movement? What if there is nowhere I need to arrive? These questions are profoundly dangerous to the ego, because the ego maintains control through future orientation. Notice how often the mind escapes the present by obsessing over a future that does not yet exist. Future success, future recognition, future security, future legacy. Many people sacrifice their entire lives trying to become unforgettable. Yet the strange irony is that this obsession often prevents them from fully inhabiting the life already unfolding now. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." A timeless observation. Because much of human anxiety emerges from psychological projection. The mind lives ahead of itself, always rehearsing, always anticipating, always chasing, rarely resting in direct experience. This is why radical presence feels so unfamiliar at first. When a person genuinely returns attention to the immediate moment, the ego often interprets it as stagnation. Nothing dramatic is happening. No identity is being reinforced. No future is being conquered. Just breathing, walking, existing. To the achievement-driven mind, this feels terrifyingly unproductive. Yet ancient contemplative traditions repeatedly pointed toward this exact state as sacred. In Zen Buddhism, there is a concept sometimes described as aimless wandering, not wandering in confusion. Wandering without compulsive psychological destination. Moving through life openly rather than rigidly. Experiencing reality directly rather than forcing existence into predetermined narratives. This idea appears beautifully in the life of the Zen monk Ryokan. Ryokan lived with extraordinary simplicity. He owned almost nothing, wrote poetry, walked through forests, played with children, slept beneath the sky. To the modern world, such a life might appear insignificant. Yet centuries later, Ryokan is remembered not because he conquered the world, but because he embodied profound peace within it. There is a famous story about a thief entering Ryokan's hut one night. The thief searched everywhere, but found nothing worth stealing. Ryokan returned, saw the thief, and quietly said, "You have come a long way to visit me. You should not leave empty-handed." He removed his robe and offered it to the thief. After the thief departed, Ryokan sat naked beneath the moon and whispered, "Poor fellow. I wish I could give him this beautiful moon." This is radical presence, not passive weakness, not naive detachment, but complete freedom from compulsive grasping. The ego measures life through accumulation. Presence measures life through direct experience. One constantly asks, "What more do I need?" The other quietly observes, "What is already here?" This shift transforms everything, because once the obsession with achievement softens, the ordinary world becomes astonishingly alive again. Simple moments regain depth. Tea becomes meaningful. Rain becomes meaningful. Silence becomes meaningful. Conversation becomes meaningful. The person no longer needs dramatic stimulation to feel existence. And this may be one of the clearest signs of spiritual maturity. Not mystical visions, not superiority, but the ability to fully inhabit ordinary life without constantly escaping it psychologically. There is another reason the ego clings so tightly to fixed purpose. A rigid purpose creates the illusion of certainty. It protects us from ambiguity, from unpredictability, from the vast openness of existence. But life itself is fluid. The future is uncertain. And deep down, the ego hates uncertainty. So it constructs elaborate plans and identities to create psychological stability. 5-year plans, 10-year plans, life timelines, milestones. Again, planning itself is not the problem. The suffering begins when identity becomes imprisoned inside rigid expectations, because life rarely unfolds according to our mental blueprints. Unexpected loss arrives. Unexpected opportunities appear. People change. Dreams evolve. Entire identities dissolve. And those who cling too rigidly often suffer deeply when reality refuses to obey their narrative. This is why wisdom traditions emphasize adaptability over control, flow over rigidity, participation over domination. The Taoist sages compared this to water. Water does not resist the shape of life. It adapts naturally, flows naturally, and because it does not cling rigidly to form, it remains powerful. Perhaps human beings are healthiest when approached similarly, not treating life as a fixed staircase toward predetermined success, but as a living conversation, an unfolding relationship with mystery. This requires trust. Trust in intuition. Trust in curiosity. Trust in direct experience. Rather than forcing existence into artificial certainty, many people are secretly waiting for absolute clarity before allowing themselves to live fully. But clarity often emerges through movement itself, not beforehand. A musician does not discover music by endlessly theorizing. A poet does not discover poetry by obsessively planning every future sentence. Creation unfolds through participation. Likewise, authentic living unfolds through engagement with the present, rather than obsessive control over the future. This is one reason purposelessness can become surprisingly liberating, not purposelessness as despair, but purposelessness in the traditional societal sense, the realization that existence does not require cosmic justification to be meaningful. A sunset does not need a business plan. A river does not need a resume. Birdsong does not require productivity metrics. And yet, none of these things are meaningless. They simply exist fully as themselves. Human beings have forgotten how to do this. We have become addicted to turning existence into achievement. But perhaps life is less like a corporate ladder and more like music. Music has meaning while it is being played, not because it arrives somewhere at the end. Imagine listening to a symphony while obsessing only about the final note. You would miss the entire beauty of the experience. Yet this is how many people approach life, always rushing toward the next chapter, the next accomplishment, the next version of themselves, never fully hearing the music already unfolding. This creates enormous anxiety, because the ego experiences every present moment as insufficient. Something must always be improved, corrected, optimized. But radical presence interrupts this cycle completely. Presence says, this moment is allowed to exist exactly as it is. Again, this does not mean abandoning growth. It means growth no longer emerges from self-hatred, no longer emerges from deficiency. A flower grows naturally toward sunlight, not because it despises itself for being a seed. Likewise, human transformation becomes healthier when driven by curiosity rather than shame, and this changes productivity profoundly. Modern productivity is often rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of irrelevance, fear of inadequacy. But there is another way to act. Action emerging from stillness, from alignment, from creative overflow. The individual still creates, still contributes, still moves through life. But now the movement feels lighter, more organic, less desperate. A calm mind works differently from an anxious mind. The anxious mind reacts compulsively. The calm mind responds consciously. One is driven by pressure, the other guided by presence. This is why some of history's most extraordinary individuals protected silence fiercely. Leonardo da Vinci spent long periods observing nature without agenda. The Buddha sat silently beneath the Bodhi tree before awakening. The poet Basho wandered aimlessly through landscapes, discovering wisdom inside ordinary moments. These individuals understood something modern culture often forgets. Stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is intelligence. The deeper mind speaks softly. Intuition rarely screams. Truth often arrives quietly, but the noise of constant striving drowns it out. This is why solitude becomes essential occasionally. Not permanent isolation, but temporary distance from performance, distance from comparison, distance from endless stimulation, so the inner voice can become audible again. Many people fear silence because silence removes distraction. But once the initial discomfort passes, another experience begins emerging. A subtle confidence. Not the loud confidence of ego, not superiority. A quieter confidence. The confidence of no longer needing to constantly prove your worth. This confidence changes relationships too. Because people who are no longer desperately trying to become someone can finally encounter others more authentically. Not as competitors, not as validation sources, but as fellow human beings sharing existence. Compassion deepens naturally when comparison weakens. Presence deepens naturally when performance softens. And slowly, the person begins inhabiting life differently. Less frantic, less divided internally, more available to reality, more available to beauty, more available to silence. This is the power of the Meadow, The meadow does not demand achievement before allowing peace. It simply invites you to stop running long enough to notice you were already alive, already breathing, already standing inside existence itself. And perhaps this is the ultimate irony. The horizon you have been chasing your entire life was never meant to be reached. Because its purpose was not arrival. Its purpose was to exhaust the ego until you finally turned around and discovered the quiet miracle of the present moment waiting behind you all along. Perhaps the deepest freedom in life begins the moment you stop treating yourself as a project that must constantly be completed. The modern world teaches us to chase horizons endlessly, to optimize every moment, to measure our value through achievement, productivity, and recognition. But the horizon never truly arrives. There is always another goal, another identity, another mountain waiting in the distance. And somewhere inside that endless pursuit, many people forget how to simply exist. Yet the ancient sages, Zen masters, poets, and contemplatives pointed toward a radically different possibility. That peace is not found at the end of striving. It is found underneath striving, in presence, in stillness, in the quiet meadow of this moment. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because the compulsion to constantly become finally softens. You do not need to earn the right to rest inside your own existence. You do not need to justify your worth through endless motion. Sometimes the most profound transformation happens not when you finally reach the horizon, but when you stop chasing it, when you feel the ground beneath your feet, when you breathe fully into the life already here. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that has always been enough. So tonight, before rushing toward tomorrow again, pause for a moment. Listen to the silence around you. Notice the space you already occupy. And remember, the meadow was never somewhere far away. You have been standing inside it all along.